Dogs don't grieve, kid. They move on, just like people should. Those were the first cold words to hit 9-year-old Lyra as she stepped into the dusty warehouse where the retired K9 auction was being held. Her boots barely made a sound on the concrete floor, but her presence turned heads, because children didn't come here, and certainly not alone. In her hand she clutched a small silver dog tag, its edges worn smooth from the way she had held it every night for the past 2 years. Around her neck hung an oversized jacket that still faintly smelled like the man who'd given her that tag. The man who never came home from his final deployment, Sergeant Nathan Riker, her father. The handler who'd spoken to her, a tall, weathered man named Rick, folded his arms and tilted his head, half confused, half dismissive. This ain't a shelter, sweetheart. These dogs ain't pets. They're ex-military. They bite. They don't cuddle. Lyra didn't flinch. She looked up at him with eyes far older than her years and said, "I'm not here to adopt. I'm here to find someone." Rick chuckled under his breath, but something about her voice, so calm, so precise, made him pause. "You're looking for someone at a dog auction?" She nodded. "His name is Aries, my dad's partner. You have him here, don't you?" The room fell quieter. A few men in uniforms shuffled uncomfortably. One of them muttered, "Isn't that the shepherd they marked unfit for rehoming? Too aggressive since the incident." Lyra's hand clenched tighter around the tag. "He's not aggressive. He's heartbroken." Rick squinted at her, unsure whether to laugh again or take her seriously. "And what makes you think we're just gonna hand him over to a little girl?" She held out the tag. It shimmered in the light, catching Rick's eye. He took it reluctantly and read the inscription out loud. "Sergeant Nathan Riker, K9 Unit. Till mission's done, you're not alone." His voice faltered near the end. That motto was known to anyone who'd served in Riker's unit. The bond between Riker and Aries had been legendary. They'd survived ambushes, explosions, months of isolation in hostile territory. Aries had pulled Riker from a burning vehicle once, saved his life. And when Riker died on a routine supply drop gone wrong, Aries was there too, howling for hours beside the body until extraction arrived. After the funeral, Aries disappeared into a haze of confusion and command reshuffling. He refused food, bit a medic, snapped at anyone who tried to approach. Eventually, he was transferred to a holding unit, considered too unstable for field work, too unpredictable to be adopted. But Lyra had never forgotten him. "I didn't get to say goodbye to either of them," she said softly now, voice cracking. "But I remember what Dad told me before he left. He said, if anything happens to me, Aries will know. He'll come home. Just give him this." She gestured to the tag. "Only, they never brought him back." Rick rubbed the back of his neck. "Kid, I'm sorry, but this ain't a fairy tale. The dog's dangerous. He hasn't let anyone near him in months. And besides, there's a line of bidders coming in. Security contractors, ex-Marines, private firms. He's not even supposed to be shown today." Lyra's shoulders sank, but only for a second. Then she lifted her chin again. "Then let me try. 1 minute. Just me and him. If he doesn't remember, I'll leave." Rick hesitated. There were rules. There were risks. But there was also something in the girl's eyes that made it impossible to just walk away. He looked to the other handlers. No one stopped him. "Fine," he grunted. "But if he growls, we pull you out." The hallway to the kennels smelled like metal, bleach, and something deeper, the scent of waiting. Cage doors clicked. Dogs stirred. But one enclosure remained still. Aries. When Lyra stepped in, her breath caught. The dog was massive, larger than she remembered. His coat, once dark and glossy, was now dulled. His eyes, once fierce and full of fire, looked vacant. He didn't move, didn't lift his head, not even when she called his name. "Aries," she whispered, stepping slowly forward. "It's me. It's Lyra." Nothing. She took out the tag, now hanging from a thin chain, and let it dangle in the air. "He told me you'd know, that if I gave you this, you'd come home." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the faintest flicker, an ear twitch, a blink, a low, uncertain whine. Lyra knelt on the cold floor, just outside the gate. "You remember me, don't you? You used to guard my room. You stole my toast. Every morning. You never barked unless someone tried to tickle me. Please, don't forget me now." Aries stood. The handlers froze. His posture was tense, his chest rumbled. One paw inched forward, and then he whined again, soft, vulnerable, heartbreaking, in. The next second, without warning, he pushed forward, forcing his muzzle between the bars. Lyra pressed her hand to it, and the giant shepherd let out a sound that didn't belong in a war dog. A soft, trembling cry. Rick's voice came from behind, hoarse and disbelieving. "I'll be damned." But Lyra didn't hear him. She was too busy whispering through her tears, "I missed you too." The dog tag swayed between them, reflecting the light. 2 names engraved in steel, 2 hearts stitched together by memory, and a bond no war, no distance, no authority could break, and that was only the beginning. Ares didn't move when the cage door finally creaked open. His massive frame remained rooted, like stone carved by sorrow. The light from the hallway spilled into the kennel, outlining his silhouette in gold, but his eyes stayed fixed on the ground, as if looking up would only prove again that the face he longed for wasn't there. Rick stood by the corner, arms crossed, heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. He had handled hundreds of war dogs, trained them, retired them, buried some, but nothing about this felt routine. Nothing about this girl felt like protocol. Lyra took a single step into the room. Her boots crunched on the grit-streaked floor. She paused, her small frame trembling, and let the tag dangle freely again. "Ares," she whispered, her voice raw but steady. "I'm here now. You don't have to wait anymore." The name seemed to hover in the air, and this time something shifted. Ares's ears twitched, then turned slightly toward her. Slowly, as though rising from deep water, he lifted his gaze. When his eyes met hers, a flicker of recognition shimmered, confused at first, as if afraid it was a trick. Then, a low, almost inaudible sound escaped him. Not a growl, not a whimper, something in between, something broken. He stepped forward, once, then again. The handlers outside stiffened, but Rick raised a hand, signaling them to wait. Lyra didn't flinch. Instead, she reached out and dropped to her knees, her voice no longer shaking. "Do you remember when I was sick that winter? You laid by my bed for a week straight. Dad said you didn't sleep at all. You waited for me to open my eyes." Ares took another step, then a fourth. When he was close enough, he pressed his massive head into her chest and let out a choked, muffled cry that no one in the room had ever heard from a combat K9. Lyra wrapped her arms around his neck. Her fingers sank into his coarse fur, and she sobbed without shame. Outside the cage, the room had gone utterly still. Rick let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "He remembers," he muttered. "God help us, he remembers." But as the handlers prepared to document the incident and begin the long list of formalities, the moment cracked with the sound of heavy boots stomping into the corridor. A voice, loud and impatient, cut through the quiet. "What's going on here? Who authorized someone in that enclosure?" The man who appeared was tall, broad, and dressed in a sharp gray uniform that screamed authority. His nameplate read, "Cpete Yarrow." He looked at Lyra, then at Ares, who now stood protectively in front of the girl, his stance wary. Rick stepped forward. "She's Sergeant Riker's daughter. That's his partner in there." Yarrow scoffed. "This dog was classified unstable. The girl's not even supposed to be in this facility. Who let her in?" "I did," Rick said firmly. "You overstepped." "I followed my gut," Rick replied. "And I was right." Yarrow approached the cage, eyes narrowed. "This dog has a record. 3 bites. 1 handler needed stitches. He was on the list to be auctioned to private security. We had firms lined up. Big money, too." Lyra stood now, not hiding behind Ares. She pulled the tag from around her neck and held it toward Yarrow. "He's not a weapon. He's a soldier. And he's all I have left of my dad." Yarrow looked at her, unmoved. "Sentiment doesn't override orders. This dog was deemed government property. You can't just waltz in with a memory and override protocol." Rick took a step closer. "And yet no one else could get near Ares without risking a lawsuit. Until her. Doesn't that say something?" Yarrow's jaw tightened. "Even if I wanted to bend the rules, I can't. She's underage. No legal guardian. No adoption eligibility. And we have contracts pending." "She has legal documents," Rick shot back. "I checked her file. Her aunt filed temporary guardianship, and there's a clause in Sergeant Riker's will, one naming Ares as part of his estate, to be passed to Lyra under witness. The paperwork was buried. Someone didn't want to see it through." Yarrow stared at him, stunned into silence. Lyra stepped forward again. "My dad trusted Ares more than anyone. He wouldn't want him sold. He wanted him home." Ares pressed against her leg, protective and calm all at once. It wasn't the behavior of a feral, unhinged dog. It was the loyalty of a guardian finally, back where he belonged. Rick nodded slowly. You can call the buyers. Tell them the dog's already spoken for. Yarrow hesitated. The warehouse was quiet again, but the weight of a soldier's bond filled every corner of it. He looked from Ares to Lyra and saw something that cut through all the red tape. Grief, loyalty, and something even deeper. A promise fulfilled. Finally, he sighed and turned away. Fine, I'll sign the release. But this is on your head, Rick. Rick gave a crooked smile. Gladly. That afternoon, under a wide sky and fading sun, Lyra walked out of the warehouse with Ares by her side. The dog's gait was strong again, his head high. The weight he carried for years had finally found a place to rest, at the side of the one person who had never stopped waiting for him. And as they passed the gates together, Lyra whispered, "Let's go home, boy." Ares didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply leaned against her gently, a silent vow to protect her for the rest of his life. And this time, no one was going to take him away. The ride back to the small apartment on the edge of town was silent at first, but not in a sad way. It was the silence that follows something big, something sacred. Ares sat in the back seat of Rick's truck, head resting beside Lyra's hand. His breath was steady now. His eyes no longer darted at every sound. For the first time in months, maybe longer, he looked like he believed he was safe. Lyra had curled up against the passenger door, the weight of everything hitting her in waves. She had walked into that facility prepared to beg. She didn't expect the dog to remember her, let alone fall into her arms like he'd been waiting for her all along. But deeper down, a small part of her had hoped, and hope had been enough. Rick glanced at her, the late afternoon sun cutting slants of gold across his dashboard. "You hungry, kid?" She nodded faintly, a little. He didn't press more questions, even though he had dozens. About her dad, about where she'd been staying, about how she'd found the dog tag, but something in her face told him she wasn't ready yet. So instead, he stopped at a quiet diner with outdoor seating and got 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and a bowl of water for Ares. They ate slowly, and Ares lay at Lyra's feet, head on her shoe like it was a pillow. When they were finished, Rick leaned back in his seat. "There's a storm coming tonight. If you want, you both can stay at my place. Safer than wherever that temporary housing file said you were put." Lyra didn't answer right away, but then, in a voice soft but certain, she said, "He doesn't like storms alone. He used to crawl under my bed during thunder." Rick nodded. "Then he won't have to do that tonight." But as the sky darkened and the wind started to pick up, so did something else, something they couldn't yet see. Just as Rick was locking up for the night, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He nearly let it go to voicemail, but instinct made him answer. Rick Carter. The voice on the other end was clipped, official. "This is Agent Vaughn with Federal Logistics. We need to speak with you about the K9 unit you released this morning. Asset Echo 14. Designation Ares." Rick tensed. "The dog isn't an asset. He's been legally transferred to the Guardian listed in Sergeant Riker's will. Regardless of paperwork, that dog was flagged for reassignment under Security Protocol 7th C. You may have unknowingly violated federal transfer restrictions. We'll be arriving within 24 hours. Rick's stomach turned. "Are you telling me that dog is classified?" "Not classified. Monitored." His last mission was tied to something still under internal review. Rick's voice dropped to a growl. "If you think you're taking him back, you're going to have to go through me, and through a 12-year-old girl who just got her best friend back." There was a pause. "This isn't about the girl, it's about national security." Rick hung up. Upstairs, Lyra sat on the floor brushing Ares's coat. She'd found her dad's old duffel bag in Rick's attic, the one marked with faded initials and a patch from his final deployment. Inside were a few photos, a pair of dog boots, and an envelope addressed to her. She hadn't opened it yet. Something about it felt too heavy for the moment. Rick came up, his face pale. "We may have company. Tomorrow." Lyra froze. "What kind of company?" "The kind that wears suits and doesn't like people asking too many questions." Ares growled low under his breath, as if he understood. Rick knelt beside them. "Listen, I'll do everything I can, but there's something strange about all this. I need to know. Did your dad ever mention anything about Ares? Anything that didn't make sense?" Lyra looked down at the letter. She finally peeled it open, hands trembling. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in her father's unmistakable scrawl. Her eyes skimmed the words, and her voice broke as she read aloud. If anything happens to me, know this. Ares wasn't just trained to protect. He was part of something bigger. He carried a flash drive in his collar on every mission. The last one, they never found. If he's still alive, he might be holding something they want buried. Don't trust anyone who tells you otherwise. Rick's blood ran cold. Where's the collar he came in with? Lyra's eyes widened. They took it off him when we arrived. Rick was already moving. He rushed to his truck, tore open the glove box where they'd tossed the dog's gear earlier, and dug out the thick tactical collar. He ran his fingers along the inside lining until he felt it, something tiny, almost imperceptible, sewn beneath the leather. With delicate hands, he pulled at the seam until a small silver chip fell into his palm. Ares watched every movement, alert and silent. Rick stared at the chip. Whatever this is, someone was willing to bury a decorated soldier to keep it hidden. And Lyra, with tears slipping silently down her cheeks, whispered, "Then we can't let them take him again." The wind howled outside. Lightning split the sky. And in that moment, as thunder rolled through the walls and shadows danced across the floor, three things became painfully clear. The government hadn't forgotten Ares. They never planned to let him go. And this time, he wouldn't be the only one fighting for survival. The storm had arrived by morning, but it wasn't rain or thunder that rattled the windows. It was the sound of black cars rolling into the gravel lot of Rick's cabin. No sirens, no loud bangs, just that cold, deliberate kind of arrival that meant trouble had come dressed in suits. Rick stood at the door, one hand on the frame, the other gripping the small flash drive that had been hidden inside Ares's collar. He didn't know what it contained, but whatever it was, it had scared the government enough to leave a decorated war dog chained, forgotten, and nearly put down. That said enough. Inside, Lyra sat at the kitchen table, Ares curled beside her feet like a sentry. She hadn't said much since last night. The letter from her father was folded carefully in her hoodie pocket, and though her eyes looked heavy, there was something different in them now. Something quiet, but unbreakable. She was no longer just a grieving child trying to find a piece of her past. She was now its protector. The knock came soft but sharp. Rick opened the door to find two men in long coats, badges barely visible beneath their lapels. The taller one introduced himself as Agent Vaughn. "We're here for Echo 14, he said plainly. "This won't take long. You came. For a dog like you, we're hunting a fugitive," Rick muttered, keeping his body square in the doorway. "And he has a name. His name is Ares." The other man, younger and less composed, glanced past Rick's shoulder. "We don't want trouble, just compliance. This dog was embedded in an operation still under audit. There are things he was exposed to that, like my father's." "Death?" Lyra's voice came from behind Rick, small but razor-sharp. Both agents looked toward her. Ares had risen now, standing beside her, eyes locked onto the men as if sensing danger in every breath they took. "I read the letter," Shiho continued. "I know about the drive. I know why you really left him behind." Rick stepped aside just enough to let Lyra pass. Her fists were clenched, her voice trembling not with fear, but fury. "You think you can erase someone just because the truth is inconvenient. But you didn't know my dad, and you didn't know Ares. He was more than just a tool. He was family." Vaughn's face didn't flinch. "The contents of that drive are classified. Possession outside authorized channels is a federal offense. And throwing a 12-year-old into the system after denying her rights isn't," Rick snapped. "Because that's what they did to her. You don't want a dog. You want silence." There was a pause, a dangerous one. Vaughn stepped forward. "We're done negotiating." Ares moved, not with aggression, but with intention, stepping directly in front of Lyra, his body firm, unwavering. And in that instant, the older agent saw something that unnerved him. Loyalty that couldn't be bought, fearlessness that couldn't be programmed. He lowered his voice. "You have no idea what's on that drive. It's not just about missions. It could compromise entire operations." "Then maybe it's time the truth came out," Rick replied coldly. "Because clearly the only ones who weren't compromised were this dog and the man who trained him." Vaughn exhaled slowly, frustrated. "You're forcing our hand." "No," Lyra said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You forced it when you left him behind like he didn't matter." Just then, a sudden sound broke the tension, the growl of another engine. A battered white SUV pulled up fast, tires kicking up gravel. A woman stepped out, tall and dressed in civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable posture of someone who had worn a uniform. Her badge flashed briefly. "Department of Veteran Affairs." Stand down, she said, holding out a hand to the agents. Vaughn narrowed his eyes. On whose authority? Mine, she answered calmly. I reviewed Sergeant Riker's file and the footage. That dog saved a unit from walking into an ambush. Riker took a bullet protecting him, not the other way around. You left Ares because the footage contradicted your after-action report. That's obstruction, and now it's on record. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Vaughn looked away, jaw clenched. Without a word, he turned and walked back to the car. The younger agent followed, hesitant, glancing one last time at Ares before climbing into the vehicle. As the cars disappeared down the road, the woman approached Rick and Lyra. I'm sorry this took so long. We had to dig through layers of red tape and lies. But your father, he wasn't just brave. He was right, and now we can prove it. Lyra couldn't speak. She just fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around Ares, who pressed his head into her chest with a whimper that sounded like relief. Rick looked at the woman. What happens now? We file the report. We clear your names, and we make sure no one ever calls him an asset again. That night, with the storm finally past, Lyra opened the front door and stepped into the quiet. Ares followed, his tail gently thudding against her leg. The stars were visible now, scattered and brilliant, and somewhere beyond them, she knew, her father was watching. For the first time in a long while, her heart felt still. She sat down on the porch steps, Ares resting his head on her lap. You're home now, she whispered, and I'm never letting you go again.